Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Graceologie with Gwen Smith podcast. I'm Gwen Smith, and I am so glad you've joined me today. Around here, we have fun, faith-focused, grace-filled conversations, all to help you know and trust God more. Our discussions are honest, often humorous, and always practical, and they're going to encourage you in meaningful ways to live out and lean on the grace of Jesus in the midst of cluttered, messy days. You got any of those? I know I do, and I cannot wait to get to today's conversation, which is all about owning your voice and advancing God's goodness in the world. My guest is the captivating, congenial, and inspirational Jo Saxton. Jo is an author, speaker, podcast host, and leadership coach. She's dedicated her career to growing leadership teams around the world and empowering women to find their purpose in their personal lives and in leadership. She's the author of 4 books, including her newest, Ready to Rise, which is what we talk about today. Y'all, this woman is fire. She is confident, hilarious, down to earth, and so thoughtful. More importantly, though, Jo is a sold-out Jesus lover, and she lives to make his fame known and to make a difference in the lives of others. And today, I am 100% confident that she is going to speak a word directly to you. Many women struggle feeling weighed down by fear and insecurity, while longing to rise up in their calling and purpose. Let's be honest, real-life issues press down, discourage, and derail us from leading and serving in areas that God calls us to. In this discussion, Jo shares some powerful biblical examples and some insights from her own journey that will help move you forward in your purpose, owning your voice, and boldly advancing God's goodness in the world. Ultimately, y'all, if you like straight talk and you like to laugh as you learn like I do, then you are going to love this episode. Hey guys, before we jump into the episode, I want to hit you with a personal challenge. We talk a lot around here about studying the Bible, and here's why. Everything about your relationship with God grows stronger when you're intentional to get to know Him more by studying His Word. It informs your emotions, increases your courage, decreases your doubt, and bolsters your believing. All amazing things, right? It helps you move forward in faith and experience the power, perspective, and peace God provides. So I'm inviting you to download a free 5-day Psalm Challenge that's going to guide you on an exciting journey with the Lord. Go to psalmchallenge.com, that's psalmchallenge.com, and take the free 5-day Psalm Challenge. I promise you these 5 days of focused study will bless you so much. And now let's head into the episode. Jo Saxton, I am so excited to have you on the Graceologie podcast today. Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Yay. Well, around here, we always start off with a fast, fun favorites round so that I can get to know my guests in a fun, casual, girlfriendy kind of way. So are you ready?
Yep.
Okay. Jo, how tall are you?
5'9".
Coffee or tea?
Oh, that's a hard one. That is a very hard one because I feel like each of them have a purpose in a different way.
I do too.
I'm a herbal tea fan. I do love herbal tea.
What's your favorite kind?
Oh, now, again, there's one called, and it's not available in the States very often. It's in different parts of the States, called Snore and Peace. And it is, it's brilliant. It's by the sustainable company called Clippers, and it has chamomile and lavender and balsam, and it's glorious. I think that's my favorite. Ooh. That's the one I always come home to. I do.
Okay, perfect. Jo, what is your go-to skincare item?
Oh, moisturizer. I am all about the and for black skin, you kind of grow up moisturizing. So it's not like I've got a budget extra for this. This is our skin. So
exactly.
And this is the beauty of our skin. So I like all the shea butters for my skin. Mm-hmm. And then my sister buys me a moisturizer that she sends from the UK for me. And I'm forever grateful.
That's a good sister.
She's amazing. She always has been. But that was a particular gift that I was like, I wouldn't pay that kind of money for this myself, so thank you.
That's amazing. I love your sister already. Okay, what is your favorite 80s band?
Oh, Wham.
Oh, look at you going so quick with that.
Oh, that was a no-brainer. That was absolutely right. Yes.
All right. Considering where you grew up, I have to ask, have you watched The Crown?
Oh, goodness, yes. It's absolutely... it's like, let's say if it comes out on a Sunday night, then probably by Tuesday, I'm done with the series. I've watched it all. It's just necessary viewing. It is excellent. Yes, I did.
It totally is. Okay. Where did you meet your husband?
We went to the same church, but we met on a mission trip to Germany and we sat next to each other on the plane. Another friend of mine had asked me to put in a good word for her with him.
You're like, no.
Well, I was interested in somebody else at the time, so I just wasn't even, I didn't even think about it, to be honest. And she too was hedging her bets, so she asked me to put her name in for a couple of people. So I was like, all right, I can put it out there. And I was very faithful. I'm going to tell you, I was a very good cheerleader for the sisterhood. But yeah, that one didn't work out the way I anticipated.
I love it. Okay. On a scale of 1 to 10, Jo, how organized is your master closet right now?
You know what? If you'd have asked me a week ago, I would have said minus 13 because it was devastating. But I can say a 9 right now. And,
wow.
And this is probably the only point in the year. If you asked me in 6 months' time, I'd be like, yeah, it's 3. And then but right now, because I did a deep clean and a deep kind of, okay, you're never going to wear that again. Get rid. This one, you've got one summer to wear this, then it's out in September. All of that kind of stuff was happening. So I'm very proud of myself. And thank you so much for interviewing me at this moment in history. This is the only time.
Timing was led by the spirit on that one, friend.
I receive it. My goodness.
Okay,
wow.
Jo, would you rather have unlimited sushi for life or unlimited tacos for life?
Oh, my goodness.
We go deep here at Graceologie.
I think I would say unlimited sushi, actually. I think I would. But I'm weeping slightly. That's a very conflicting feeling, but I think I'm going to go with unlimited sushi.
I'm with you.
It's hard.
Can't go wrong either way, I know. Okay, what is your current favorite worship song?
Oh, I have been going a little retro. So there are so many. Actually, I'm now thinking back to my what I like to call my YouTube worship times, where I play a little song and I kind of skip over the fact that the ads come in and wreck your flow.
I know.
And I'm like, Lord, I'm just going to pray over that until, oh no, I need to push a button. Hold on, God. Hold on. So I think I'm torn between 2, actually. I've narrowed it down to 2, and it's Waymaker.
Yes.
By Sinat has just been a powerful one. And then an older song by Tasha Cobb's Fill Me Up.
Oh, wonderful.
Which is just, those would be the 2 that have managed to keep on coming through, ads or not.
I love it.
Ads or not.
Ads or not. Bring it, girl. I love it. And your final question in the Fast Fun Favorites round is, if you could witness any one event from the Bible, what would you choose to see?
Oh, I think it probably, although I kind of feel I saw it in Moana, I feel it would be the parting of the Red Sea.
Oh, that's what my husband said. We talked about this at dinner the other night, and that's exactly what he said.
I think it would still be the parting of the Red Sea. There's just the drama of that, the intensity of that. I just can't even imagine. So, and I feel I've seen it popularized in movies.
I was going to say, you can see that in the movie.
Yeah, I don't think we saw it. I don't feel like it's like, oh, that feels better now because I saw Charlton Heston as Moses. No, that's not it, friends. I don't feel we saw it. And I think I would like to see the drone version. Do you know what I mean? The drone sweep of the crowds. I want to see the look on people's faces, whoever went first and tentatively kind of, I want to see it.
Yes, and it would have taken, the crossing would have taken hours actually, because it was millions of people. And it wasn't a little, it wasn't a 10-foot jaunt.
No, it wasn't a little skip and a jump at all.
Oh, well, that's a great answer. And I absolutely enjoyed your Fast Fun Favorites round. So thanks for
Thank you.
Playing along with me, Jo. Now, would you take a moment and just formally introduce yourself to my Graceologie community?
Yes. Well, hello, Graceologie community. I'm Jo Saxton. I am an author. I'm a speaker and I'm a leadership coach. I coach women leaders, whether they are in churches or in business or entrepreneurs or building in their local communities. I coach them in their leadership development. I am married. I have 2 teenage girls. So you can pray for me anytime you want. I mean, they're wonderful, but we're all at home right now. And I am married to one guy, you'll be pleased to know, who
we're very pleased to know that. Yes.
You'll be like, okay. And who is 5 years younger than I am. Because
no way.
Why not, sis? 5 years. Why not, friends? Why not? That was my discerning process. Why not?
That's terrific. Well, it's always awesome to welcome another podcast sister to the show. So, yes, you have these 2 beautiful teenage girls and your husband, and you guys live in Minneapolis, right?
Yes.
So how are y'all doing in the quarantine?
Well, you know what? It's been surreal and good and weird and hard all at once.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Every single one of those words. Check, 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 check. Yes.
You know what I mean? So surreal in terms of the streets being so quiet and us all being home every day, all day. Our stay-at-home guidelines have been you can get outside, exercise, fishing, hiking, or whatever. There's lots of lakes here, so people can be away, but that's it. That's been the main thing. So it's been hard with the kids. I mean, they've been great. They're fantastic, but they miss their friends.
Yes.
So it's been guiding them through that and working out ways in which they can stay connected. It's been hard in terms of, as a speaker, and that my job has involved a lot of travel for the last 10 years.
Yes.
And that's not happening and shouldn't anytime soon.
Right.
It's been good in the sense of the time I spend with family and stuff. We've got these kind of new emerging habits that we're enjoying in terms of being together, which is fun. It's hard because it is stressful still.
Yeah.
It's stressful and it's uncertain and there's the grief you expect and there's the unknowns that you didn't see coming, and it's just draining. It's a strangely draining experience as well.
It is. So, yeah. I would share in that because I actually have 3 college-age kids. And so my husband and I were empty nesters just as of fall. And so we were like, this is cool. Everyone's where they should be. And now they're home. And it's 5 adults. So, Jo, I hear you, girl. But there is all of that. There's the sweet and the salty. There's the, all of those notes along the way. And for us, it's been, and every one of us you mentioned grief. There's different losses for everyone. And it is interesting to kind of navigate the waters of that and to sift through. And, for one thing, I think that it should have made all of us more reflective. Yeah. We have opportunities for gratitude and we get to choose our perspective on it. So, I wanted to kind of hear your heart on that. And I expected that it would be one that was really healthy. And I'm not disappointed because you have a positivity about you that is, I think, really rooted in the gospel, and you deeply know the promises of God and who he is. And I think that informs, from what I've seen of you, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about that from you.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we have to be honest with how it is, because I know, like, as we've shared, our kids are older, yours older than mine, and more independent. I cannot imagine what it would be like to have young ones right now.
Right.
I cannot imagine, in terms of, I feel I'm just beginning to have glimpses of margin in my mind right now. Do you know what I mean? Glimpse. It's like, oh, there's some margin tomorrow. Yeah. Okay.
I know.
But I've learned through and we've all had earthquakes of our own personal kinds in our life, haven't we? We've all had moments where nothing made sense and nothing added up and it was just confusing and painful. And so I found myself drawing from those stories and God's faithfulness in those to help me with this and to help me get perspective or re-find my footing whenever I lose footing. And I think I'm just giving myself permission to not have it together.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I think we just have to. I can't. There are days where I feel optimistic. There are hours when I feel optimistic, and there are hours that I don't. And there are others that you just grit your way through because they're necessary. And I'm grateful that God's hold on my life is stronger than mine on His. Do you know what I mean? I'm grateful that the Bible talks about us being kept by the power of God, and I feel that is what is happening in the midst of it. But I'm also keenly aware of friends who are mourning in deep ways.
Yes.
People,
yes,
deep losses, the losses of jobs, the losses of income, the loss of expectations and dreams. It may be a new normal, but it's not one any of us asked for necessarily.
That's right. That's right. And you and I have a lot of overlap in our professional calling because, all of my speaking events for the spring and summer rescheduled and that's gone and that's changed. And so I'm similar in that way. And my oldest son is a senior in college, so he just finished his classes and, so he missed his whole final semester and there will be no college graduation from the University of North Carolina. Yeah. And he's getting married on June 21st. And so we're still navigating the waters of what that's going to look like. And it's been, so, and for everyone, and you're totally right, for many, there's been loss of jobs and income and all kinds of strains and pains. In light of that, it is important that we have honest dialogues. It's also important that we don't get swept up into the undertow of overwhelm, which, I believe that the presence of God and His Word and the community of believers can really be just a salve to the wounds of our souls in times like this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's that reality, although we have to be spatially distant for our own safety and for other people's safety, because it's not just about us, there is a question of what does it look like to stay connected with some key people who will help you and whom you can help when the undertow is pulling. Who can carry you, who can, when there are times in my life when I couldn't speak truth over myself because I was so overwhelmed, so somebody else spoke it for me and spoke it to me. And I think this is where meaningful community comes into its own, and it's through the internet and it's through the phone calls and it's through the text. And it may not be what we're used to, but it doesn't mean it's meaningless and doesn't mean it doesn't have value. And I think community plays a strong role. I see people who want to be strong for themselves. I'm like, why? Why do that? This situation is too big for us on our own. And it's like, it's just me and God. But I'm like, even Jesus had His disciples to hang with Him. You know what I mean? And to be with Him. And they wept with Him, or at least He invited them to it when they fell asleep and stuff. And I'm like, this isn't a time for us to fall asleep on our friendships. This is not a time for us to fall asleep on our people who sustain and our faith community around us.
That's powerful. And I love that the Lord has gone before us with resources exactly like yours, like this brand new book you have coming out that just actually came out 2 weeks ago, Ready to Rise. And this is another tool, that we can use is here. The Lord had you grappling for every word in this book, months and months and months ago, so that for such a time as this, you could be, one of the sisters who comes along and links arms with these other women of God to say, honey, it is time to rise up. It is time to, as your subtitle says, own your voice, gather your community, and step into your influence. And what a powerful message. And I just love the timing of, what God allowed in this instance with your book.
Yeah, it's really surreal because I think I was probably the person who most did not love the timing. And you write something or you prepare something and you anticipate, the circumstances into which that is launched. I had no idea, like the rest of us, what we would be stepping into. And for a while, it felt a little bit icky, to be honest. It felt like, I just don't know. And it wasn't whether it felt appropriate. I knew that there would be things that would be useful for people, but how to put that out into the world, how to tell people about that felt very strange until I began to share it with members of my launch team and stuff like that, and them saying how timely it was. And then I thought, actually, it almost clicked me back into gear to realize that people who were reading it said, oh, no, this is the time. This is the time for this book, and this is the now. So you can feel icky in your corner if you want to, or you can just put this in people's hands. Because actually, like as you said, this is a tool for people in this moment because of, and when I say rise, I don't necessarily mean we're all jumping for joy. Sometimes we're rising up from from ashes, you know?
Yes.
But for some of us, owning our voice there are courageous conversations that maybe we've avoided in our busy lives, in our homes, that actually you need to sit down with your family and actually have now because you're forced to. Maybe owning your voice, it may be writing something or preparing something. Maybe you felt God called you to communicate and you're like, what does it look like now when we can't all be in a building? Well, there'll be other ways to do it. But if the Lord is inviting you, you've got to take that next step. And gathering your people, yes, we can't do it physically, but we do need to do it virtually. And I do think the thing with our influence is key right now, that we may have limited our understanding of what influence looks like, but people are desperate. Our society is desperate right now and looking for good news and looking for what good news looks like when you're shut in by yourself and wondering what comfort looks like when you're afraid to be in the four walls of your home because it's dangerous. And where they were already in debt and now are on furlough and now losing their jobs. And here we are as people of faith saying that we have the words of eternal life and we know one who understands suffering and pain and who weeps with us and who binds broken hearts. And our influence may be being present as a friend, or it may be one extra can of food when you do your shop that goes into a food bank. There may be really tangible, practical things that we can do that we didn't necessarily say we felt called to, but uncover. I mean, often calling is uncovered in times of tragedy and stress. I mean, like you said, that thing about for such a time as this, those words came in the face of genocide.
Yes.
In the face of devastating fear, where to a woman who did not feel equipped, who didn't feel like it was going to go well, and who felt completely out of her depth by the circumstances around her and frankly was hiding.
Yes.
And honestly, we all know what that's like. We clearly haven't faced what she's faced, but we know what those feelings are like, where we feel out of our depth, want to hide and just be like, yeah, choose somebody else.
Yeah.
choose somebody else right now. I don't know what it looks like to represent God in these circumstances. I don't know what it looks like to advocate. So actually, far more calling is uncovered like that than we'd recognize. And I think it's an invitation for us to say, okay, God, I didn't expect this and see this coming, but what does it look like to be your hands and feet in this moment?
Yes. And just as much as all of our master closets look different, Jo, I mean, I'm coming back around to that. I mean, and I think of this almost as exactly what you just said took place in your master closet is we have this time to sit and to sift through the relationships in our lives, the communication norms, the purpose, the calling, all of these things, and take out what doesn't need to be there, just like cleaning out your closet, and really bring structure and order and focus to our hearts and our lives in this time to rise up in a fresh way. It is. It's a matter of pulling things together and really moving forward. And I love how in your book, Ready to Rise, that you talk about the power of family trees, and you challenge, us to consider the women in our family. Yeah. And there have been some women in your family who have uncovered their calling and purpose in some unexpected ways. And I'd love to hear you tell us about that.
Yeah. And I mean, I love the fact that you brought that up, because I think often when we think of this, we think forward and think, oh my gosh, I can't think possibly. But actually, if you know the stories of the people around you, you'd find that uncovering's been happening in ways we didn't expect. So I think of my grandmother who was widowed, who didn't expect the landscape. No one, I mean, she lived for decades after my grandfather. Yeah. She didn't expect that landscape, and yet it birthed new opportunities. I think of my mum, who moved as an immigrant from one country to another and didn't get the welcome that they'd hoped for, and yet uncovered a different kind of life. But primarily the person who comes to mind is the woman who ended up fostering me for a while, who was in World War II. And I've kept on, and I've thought of her a lot recently, because we often hear in the news and from sources like the UN describing this current crisis as a war. And war completely decimates the landscape. Nothing is recognizable anymore. It's vulnerable, it's threatening, it's overwhelming. And this was a woman who was an adult in World War II, who was a young woman in World War II. And in England, during the war effort, a number of women took on new roles because their men were at war. Yes. So she was in the fire service and serving in that way, and just uncovering all kinds of abilities that women weren't seen as having because war demanded it, and was faithfully serving in that context. But another thing that happened in World War II was where children were evacuated out of major cities, particularly speaking specifically of London, because of bombings. And so kids were evacuated for their own safety, for a period of time. And she, inspired by that, knew that she could she never wanted to get married, but she knew she could look after kids and she could help kids and stuff, even though she hadn't had much beyond an elementary school education herself because she'd had a terrible time at school. But she knew that she could do that. And out of that era, she began fostering, sometimes for a day, sometimes for months, sometimes for years. And that was uncovered in that era. Decades later, her story intersected with our family story, and she fostered me for a number of years. Yeah. And I'm just struck by the legacy of a woman who felt she was out of her depth in a world she didn't plan for, in a life she didn't plan for, having such an impact on many, many, many lives. And I think when we're dealing with our current circumstances, the landscape is changing, isn't it? And in ways that we didn't expect. You and I talk about what it means professionally for us, but it's nuancing in so many ways for so many of us that the old maps don't work. What we did on a Sunday morning doesn't happen anymore in the same way. How we function, the expectations we had for our families, our plans, the vacation we were going to have, the 25th anniversary celebration, the way we wanted to do a funeral, all of these things can't happen in this current moment. The landscape has changed. And yet, in the midst of this landscape, there are, as the dust begins to clear and we're seeing new things, there may be opportunities there. And I think I would encourage us and invite us to talk to the members of your family about the unexpected things that were birthed in difficult times.
I love that. I love the story you tell that of when you did this research, what you found out about your maternal grandma, who you said passed at 102. Honey, you've got some good genes. Wow. Praise God for that. But oh my goodness, I laughed. When I was reading the other night, I laughed and I had to share that with my husband, that you said she was a businesswoman who was just always at it. And she had to be encouraged by her brothers and sisters to retire at the age of 97. I was like, what in the world?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, my mum, it was my mum who tells me about it. She's like, "Come on." They kind of sat her down. It was like an intervention, that's as the story goes. It was a bit of an intervention where they're like, "You don't need to be doing this anymore." But she was a woman of vigor.
I love it. Who in the world is convinced to retire at 97? I mean, that's just the best. I love it. I also, I love how at the end of each chapter, you do have these questions for reflection. And one of the things that really struck me was that you encouraged your readers to take a personal inventory of the places in our lives that have been limitations and opportunities. So why do you think it's important that we take inventory of these things in our lives?
I mean, I think, one, because I think women are often wearing so many hats, busy doing so many things. We're feeling our feelings or disapproving of ourselves and thinking our thoughts and not actually reflecting on the why and how we got here. And an unexamined life can just mean that you just stay trapped in the same habits. Yes. So I think that's one part of it. I think another part is, I think we need to just take a long, hard look at how we got here. On were they the limitations that were imposed by someone's words, often found in the always and the nevers, the thing that someone said you'd never live up to or you could never be, or the things that people blame you for always being like, you're always too much, you're always not enough. Those things place limitations. Words are so powerful. And we may be living in prisons without realizing it. Yes. Or in particular moments, maybe there are particular people and what they've achieved that cast a shadow in our minds over our thinking and what our potential is. Maybe the environments we've been in have said things or functioned in a way. They may have said women were welcome or your voice was welcome, but the way they acted structurally meant that you could never actually contribute. Maybe it was in your workplace, like your first job, your formative years. What shaped you? What shaped the formative stages of your career, the formative stages of your mothering, the formative stages of your ideas or of your faith? What shaped you? Because those things may be still presenting limitations, and we might be saying no to things or hiding our gifts and calling it humility and pulling away from things and calling it holy, when actually it's fear and it's wounding. And it's really important to pay attention to that.
Wow. For the sake of my Graceologie community, I just sense that even with some of these things that you are just speaking so beautifully to need to be unpacked a little bit. You said a few moments ago, an unexamined life can leave us trapped. So I just know that there are Graceologie girls, there are listeners in my community who want to know more about that, because I know that there would be many of us who feel trapped and overwhelmed, but don't understand the benefit of an examined life. Can you just speak to that for a minute?
Yeah, I'm reminded of, I think it's Einstein who said insanity is doing the same thing again and again and expecting different results. And I know that there have been parts of my life where I've wanted to change, but I haven't attended to the problems. I haven't acknowledged them. And I think we can try to be better without examining why things are dysfunctional. And so there's a prayerful way. One of the things I often do with the end of Psalm 139 is I pray that a lot.
Yes.
On an issue, and I say, search me, O God, know my heart, test me and know my anxious thoughts, see if there's any offensive way in me, lead me in the way everlasting. And I kind of treat it like a scanner. Do you know what I mean? To scan my life.
Yeah.
Investigate me. I think the Message version begins like that. And so I look at maybe there's a particular area. Let's pick one just for the sake of our conversation. Let's say your friendship groups and you find yourself competing and comparing all the time. Or you find yourself comparing and putting yourself down and say, okay, let's examine that. Is the friendship you have healthy, or do you feel you've got something to prove? Is there something that person says that always kind of makes you feel inadequate? Is that about you? Is it about them? Does it trigger former relationships? Is it something they've said or done? And do you find that you're always really supportive? They don't treat you well. Examining it helps you unpack the situation, because you don't want to keep on going into relationships feeling like you've got to care and compete all the time. Some friendships are just toxic, and actually they're not your friend. Yeah. And the answer is move on. But if you don't examine that, there you are, just trying to be better, trying to be more patient. And it's like, you know what? Stop drinking poison.
Yes.
That's actually what you need to do. Stop drinking poison, move on. It's going to be easier to like that person when they've got a different proximity in your life.
That's true.
It'll be easier to forgive if you're not always saying, hey, in the name of forgiveness, I'm going to let you off the hook. Now come and trample all over me all over again. Why don't you? And if you could put me down, put my house down, put my body down, put my ideas down, or just to make yourself feel big, that's a great way to function. It isn't. It's dysfunctional. But not examining it will make us just short circuit the whole process and just be like, oh, that feeling's come up again. God, I'm so sorry. I feel really bad. I'm going to try to do better. Oh, God, here they go. That really hurt, but I've got to just, let it go. Oh, yes. God. And do you see what I'm saying? And meanwhile, someone else is looking thinking, that person isn't your friend, boo.
I know.
That person is not good for you. And so examining sometimes does that.
Hey guys, I just want to say a quick thank you to all of you in the Graceologie community who have rated this show on iTunes or who have written a short review. It makes such a big difference. So if you happen to be listening and you've not yet done it, I would really appreciate it if you would. Would you click your podcast app or go visit iTunes and give us a 5-star rating or just a quick 1-sentence review? From my heart, it would really mean a lot.
Or maybe you find yourself in patterns and you just change your vice. So sometimes if you're honest, it's drink. That's the vice. And it's like every night, and particularly in these COVID moments, because grief kind of links arms with other griefs, doesn't it? So other things are under the surface. It's all bubbling up. And sometimes one year the vice was over-exercise. Next year the vice was alcohol. Next year the vice was retail. And you're running out of vices that can fly under the radar of your existence. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're running out of vices before you admit what it is. Because actually, even the vice is actually not the point. It's the wound behind it. You might find yourself downloading things digitally which you're not proud of or whatever. And you're like, actually, these things are speaking to deep wounds and deep issues that need to be resolved if you'd allow yourself to examine it. And there's recovery groups often use this acronym HALT, asking the question, what do you do when you're hungry, angry, lonely, and tired? The things that bring you to a halt. I think something like that is a useful thing for us to kind of reflect on sometimes, if that's the area of your life that needs examination. But we're not examining to condemn. We're not examining to accuse, although you might find your enemy whispers particularly loudly in these moments. But things coming to the surface so that you can scoop them off and get rid of them. And things are coming to the surface because it's time. Yeah. Because you can only push things down to the bottom forever. And I think that's part of the examined life. And honestly, chances are, if there are things, you know already what they are. Because you've worked hard. Worked really hard manage them, and you've worked really hard to cope, and you've done really well in coping and managing, but God is inviting you to redemption, which is different to coping and managing.
Yes. And the safety of an examined life and actually putting those scriptures, Psalm 139, 23 and 24, into practice and asking the Lord to search us, is that there is a difference between conviction of the Holy Spirit and condemnation from the enemy.
There really is.
The conviction of the Holy Spirit is always going to lead us to the heart of God. You know, so there's that surrender required. The laying down that is scriptural, and that is important for all of us. But the examined life brings blessing and purpose and calling, and it brings clarity. And I love that really the message of Ready to Rise is that one of us just really honing and maybe tuning our ears more finely to the calling and unique purpose of every life, because it doesn't matter what that influence sphere looks like, we each have one. So you write that Jesus invites everyone, men and women, into God's mission for changing the world. So can you talk to, like, how did you come to that conclusion, and how should that impact the life of my listeners?
Yeah, I mean, I think when we look at Genesis, before anything went wrong with the world, we see God making men and women in his own image. In his own image. That's what the scriptures tell us. And then he invites them to take responsibility and engage with the world representing him. And before anything went wrong with the world, that's what humanity are invited to do, to know him closely and represent him in the world. And obviously we know the story, and humanity loses its way and chooses to lose its way and chooses other ways.
Right.
But the whole redemptive thing of Christ is that he's making all things new. And we see it. I mean, when we look at how even Jesus relates with women, you see a radical departure from the current religious ideas of the day. We see him having theological conversations. We see him not allowing them to be written off. We see in Luke chapter 10, verses 38 to 42, when Mary and Martha are there. And often we use this story as a kind of, okay, let's sit at the feet of Jesus. We forget what actually that meant. Right. That wasn't a devotional time. To sit there and learn was her positioning herself in the same place where all the disciples in the room were. And the disciples were learning from Jesus, not just the information, but how to live like he lived, how to engage like he engaged with the world around him. And it's like, who do you think you are, Mary? Well, she thinks she's a disciple.
Yeah.
And Jesus affirms it publicly in the presence of all of them. We see it in Joanna, Susanna, and Mary in Luke 8, who travel with the disciples. And it's just one verse, but it's there.
I know.
They travel with the disciples. They pay for the mission, but they're participants in what God is doing in making all things new. So we can expect that when that redemption includes the redemption of our purpose, not purely, oh gosh, I'm so glad the Lord has redeemed me from my sin. Absolutely. But he didn't just redeem us so we could sit and look pretty. Do you know what I mean? It's like, that's great and all. And actually, for some of us, that's been a long war. So yes, have it. Yeah. Have it. But that good news you've received is way too good to keep to yourself. That's the thing. Yeah. That's the thing. And there are gifts and talents and abilities that the women of the Graceologie community have that he is not embarrassed by. The way you have with numbers, the way you have with communication, the way you have with strategy, the way you have with hospitality, the way you have with, leading a team is something God is not embarrassed by. They are not concessions. They are his magnificent design. Yeah. All I'm encouraging us to do is to agree with what God already said about you, to agree with how God already made you. But then I think what often happens is that akin to the parable of the talents, what happens is we get given these gifts, and we know from that parable that there's one with 10, one with 5 or whatever numbers, and they invest them. They invest those talents, and there's a return. And then there's one who's like, I was kind of scared, actually. You're kind of harsh, and I didn't know what to do, so I buried it. Yep. I buried it. And I think maybe we have our own reasons for burying them. But I think sometimes there are gifts that we've buried. There are some things, like I said before, are uncovered in times of tragedy and difficulty. And there are other things that we've just simply buried. We're like, you know what? This is hard. If I start doing this, people are going to hate me. People are going to think I'm arrogant. People are going to accuse me. People are going to say, who do I think I am? I mean, you remember it, Gwen, when you started your podcast, the first time you put it out there, how vulnerable that felt.
Oh, yeah, big time.
Do you know what I mean? It's like, oh, other people are saying things, and other people so who do I think I am? It's not about who we think we are. It's who we think God is, and what He wants us to do, and whether we're simply going to live consistently with our God-given identity. That's all I'm interested in, that we live consistently with how God wired us.
Yeah.
And that will look different for all of us, and it will have nuance in different stages of our life. But if we just think it's to know that we're loved, yes, that's a foundation, but there was a commission that was for everybody. And I want to encourage us to partner with God in the renewal of all things.
That's powerful. I totally agree. So why, when we bury our talents, when we do that, why is the voice of fear so loud?
I think because we've been hurt by it. I think it's loud because it's so intimidating. I think with the enemy, I think he gets us in our thoughts in such a powerful way. Because if you can get someone before they do anything, it's easier. There's less work to do. I think fear is a very powerful strategy, and the fear of the unknown makes it so much bigger than it might be. And some of us, it's not even the fear of the unknown. It's like, you did that and you got burned. Do you want to burn again? You did that and you failed and people got hurt and you are the problem. And so why would you do that again? But I think the other question we've got to ask ourselves, because the enemy says things and he will say just enough truth to make it compelling. Like, okay, you failed. Yeah, you failed. But your Redeemer lives. Yeah, maybe people are going to question who you think you are. So you're not all of these things. And I think the question we have to keep on coming back to when we are people who are passionate about God doing wonderful things in the world. But what isn't happening? What businesses aren't being started? What podcasts aren't being launched? What courageous conversations that would redefine families aren't happening? All because fear has had the last word.
Yeah. And even it could even be the leadership of service. It could be.
Absolutely.
Who are you not loving or serving? And that's another thing, is there are opportunities for us to even reestablish in our minds what leading looks like. Because when we are in a household filled with people, leading looks like service. Leading looks like blessing. And it looks like.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's huge in this moment as well, because I think in the current crisis, the people who are leading us are wiping down checkouts so that we live.
Yes.
They are cleaning up OR rooms so that the nurses and doctors can do their jobs. I think if we choose, we can allow our understanding of leadership to expand broadly in this moment, because our heroes look very different to how they used to be. They are picking fruit because you can't pick fruit on Zoom, picking fruit so that there's food on our table so that our kids can eat.
Yes.
They are using, as John Maxwell who says, leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less is what John Maxwell says. They are stewarding their influence for the greater good. We have too often we have a very singular picture of leadership. And so we project leadership onto one specific role rather than recognizing it is stepping into your influence. And I hope that in this time, and because I think in our hearts, we see it when we applaud or we donate to or we elevate the voices who are often unseen, but they are game changers in this current moment. Yes. They are leading through service, because leadership is service. It is service. So, and I think you raise a very good point. What does it look like for you to serve in this moment? Yes. What does it look like? Because that's what Jesus said. I didn't come to be served, but to serve. Yes. So we're following in incredible footsteps here. One who rose to wash the disciples' feet, a task in John 13, a task that was seen as so low that a Jewish male slave could refuse to do it. And Jesus did that. Jesus did that. He washed the filth and the dirt off their feet and ministered to them. That's what you and I get to do. That may be one of the things that the Lord invites us to, uncovers in our lives right now, that's what it's time for.
Yes. Yes. Wow. And I agree. I think that's beautiful. I think that's a challenge, and it's going to look different to every single one of us, but we are all called to serve, to love, and to lead. So one of the things that I love to do around here, Jo, is to go real practical. And I know that you have tools to live, lead, and love by, especially in times of uncertainty. Can you unpack that so that my Graceologie girls can have kind of a handle on, let's use this as a tool in our lives today?
Yeah, I mean, I like to encourage people in terms of, because I think in this moment as well, there's so much on. We do need simple tools. Yeah. And I often like to engage us in questions. So in terms of, I want to say, what's the next step in how you live? What's the next step in how you love? What's the next step in how you lead? And in this moment, I use different tools in different moments, but this is one for this moment. And so when I say a next step, that's not asking us for perfection. That's not asking us for achievement. It's saying, what is in your hand that you can do right now? So for some of us, the next step may be, you need a nap, sis. You need a nap because you can't function fully because you've been so good taking care of everybody else that now the diminishing returns are you are spent. You are absolutely spent. And so we've got to work out how you can get some time, a little bit of time to breathe so that you can go back and serve more effectively. That may be your next step. For someone, in terms of loving someone, what does a generous gift look like in this moment? It might be like, for me and my husband, sometimes it's playing tag. It's like, I'm overwhelmed. Can you take care of this for now? The kids need something. Tag. That is the act of love. It's a little thing. It's the act of love. It may be going for a drive. It's like, I'm just going to get you out. The kids are fine. Obviously, they're teenagers. It might be, let's choose the movie that no one will step up from because it will just give you a margin. It'll give you. And in terms of leading, I think, again, I would encourage us. Leading, we might think it's an announcement, and it's taking the initiative. Taking the initiative of serving somebody else. And it may be sitting down your family and saying, okay, we're finding this really hard, but maybe all your friends are finding it hard. Can we drop a gift at the bottom of their drive today? When we do our shop, maybe we'll all get extra chocolate bars and we'll drop it at the driveway and we'll let them know to expect that they can come out and you can wave and that's your connection. Now, that may not feel like leadership, but you've just helped all your family connect with your community in a meaningful, blessing way.
I love that. So,
you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, totally. I want to challenge my Graceology community. If you can think of the answers to some of these questions, kind of what you need in terms of for you to live today, you need a map for recovery or for what next steps would be effective, or what would it look like for you to give a generous gift of love today? What would it look like to take the initiative to love someone else? If you can think of some really great ideas on this, I want you to hit me with a DM on Instagram. Yeah. I'm at Gwen Smith Music, and I will share those with Jo. And it would be super cool for us to rally as a community and just be creative in ways that we can live well and love and serve one another today and move our leadership to the forefront of our actions, because that's where people are going to see God's goodness in the world.
Absolutely. And may I say to your community as well, don't hold back on your ideas. Maybe your first step, your initiative right now is giving an idea that may seem useless to you, but is a game changer for somebody else. So even now, I want to encourage you and I want to coach you forward and say, here's an opportunity that Gwen's put before you to make a difference. And you're like, I just do that because it's something that comes to me. But we all know so many of us are so maxed out right now. We're fresh out of ideas. Yeah. Your idea will help that person think, oh my gosh, I never thought of us just going for a drive. I never thought of us going for a drive because that's not what we normally do. Thank you. That idea created space for me and my husband to have an honest conversation. That idea helped me and my teenager just connect for a minute. We just went to some random place. Yeah. We drove there and we drove for half an hour, got home, and it was a game changer. And for you, you might think, oh, we just do that. That's just what our family does. But it may not be what somebody else does, and they may not have realized they had that option. So even let this be one of those moments where you step into your influence and just share what's worked for you.
Yes, I would love to hear from you guys, and Jo would too. Definitely hit me with a DM on Instagram at Gwen Smith Music. And like I said, we'll share them. I'll share them in my story. It'll be awesome because we can spur one another on. And that is a beautiful picture of community. Jo, you are so amazing. I love the way the Lord has wired you and gifted you in the way you echo his beauty to the world. It's so powerful. I'm really excited about your book, Ready to Rise. I believe it's going to be a calling, like almost a megaphone to the hearts of women to really do that, to rise up from wherever they are and to lead well and serve well in whatever way God has fashioned them to do this. So as we kind of wrap up this conversation, I want to know, are there any final thoughts or challenges to my Graceology community on what it looks like to show up in their unique callings or purpose today, or to live in the potential of their influence?
I think I just want to remind everybody that it's okay to show up weak, and that if you show up feeling imperfect, not entirely together, not particularly robust, and maybe you've just wiped the tears off your eyes, or you just had an awkward argument, or we call them discussions or something, don't we? Or we feel like we've done something. It's okay. It's okay. And because you're in good company. When you look at the arc of scripture, you will see many, many leaders who showed up in weakness. But Paul's story reminds us that that's where God's power is made perfect. That's where it comes into its own. Yeah. So maybe your first prayer is, God help me, and show up anyway.
Yes, show up anyway. Weak is welcome. I love it. Jo, I have just enjoyed everything you have shared today, and I know that my Graceologie community is swirling with thoughts and probably comfort as well. So I would love if you would just spend these last few moments together just taking us to the throne of Jesus.
Yeah, thank you. Father God, I do want to thank you for this wonderful community. I thank you for the space it's created for people to know and learn and discover, and some grace to meet them in their earbuds, to meet them in the midst of their day. And Lord, I pray for those who are overwhelmed in this moment. I thank you that your hold on them is strong and tight, even in the midst of the storm. Lord, I thank you that your grace is strong enough and reaches way beyond our limitations. Lord, you know so many of us are at the end of ourselves.
Yes.
We invite you to meet us there. And Lord, for those of us who feel a stirring to rise, even from the ashes, even in fragile ways, I pray, Lord, that you'd help us not overthink it. Show us maybe ways we've already begun to do this, and give us the courage and the capacity to make the next step. We ask this in your name. Amen.
Amen. The book is ready to rise. Own your voice, gather your community, step into your influence. And my guest has been Jo Saxton. Jo, it has been awesome to have you on the Graceologie podcast today. Can you tell us the one place that is best to connect with you online?
Instagram is always fun.
Cool.
I think a lot of people love the Instas, so I kind of hang out there, and I do an Instagram live afternoon tea. Come and join us for tea.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Definitely going to do that. I will put links to Jo's book and to her website and to her Instagram and all her social accounts right on the show page. So you can check that out at gwensmith.net/Graceologie. Find my episode with Jo Saxton, and we will hook you up with all the links and all the show notes. So Jo, it has been awesome to have you on the show today. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. It's been great.
What an amazing conversation. I just love her, and I'm so excited to have had the opportunity to share her with you all. Be sure to visit Jo online and connect with her on social media for sure. Today's show was edited by Chad Shooping, and the music is by premiumbeat.com. If your church hosts women's events, or if you have questions, comments, or topic suggestions, send me a message or a speaking inquiry right from my website at gwensmith.net. I really do love hearing from you. All of the links and the show notes from today's episode can be found at gwensmith.net/Graceologie. That's gwensmith.net/Graceologie. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'll be back soon with another episode, but until then, if you haven't already subscribed, please open up your podcast app right now and click that subscribe button. Subscriptions and reviews on iTunes or whatever podcast app you listen to make a huge difference to those of us who are working really hard to bring you these shows. And be sure to connect with me on social media as well. I'm at Gwen Smith Music on every platform, and I hang out a ton on Instagram. And the show is at Graceologie with an IE on every platform as well. So come hang out, y'all. Now get out there and have a beautiful, grace-filled day.